Cold Red and Mind Over Murder. I'm Kristen Dilly, co-host of Mind Over Murder, along with my co-host,
Bill Thomas from Mind Over Murder.
Well, welcome back to another episode of Cold Red. I'm Ray Carr, and with me always is Fitz. Fitz, how are you?
I'm great, and especially with our good friends Bill and Kristen doing this special crossover episode about a case that's very important to them. We thought let's just do it together, and we're doing it live when the Cold Red ends. So, folks, thanks for being with us. And Kristen, why don't you and Bill walk us through some new developments in the very well-known case of Colonial Park murders? And of course, as a reminder to our listeners, Bill's sister was a victim of this serial killer. And but some new evidence has come up, some new information. Why don't you kind of give a quick summary of the case, and we'll get into. You have some questions from me and Ray, I know, and we'll do our best to answer them for you. Take it away, Kristen.
Take it away.
All right, the Colonial Parkway murders are a series of what we first thought were double homicides, but have expanded since then to include 10 victims that took place in Virginia from 1986 to 1989, and now possibly beyond that. The original victims were Kathy Thomas and Rebecca Dowski, Bill's sister and her girlfriend, as well as David Knobling and Robin Edwards, Keith Call and Cassandra Haley, Daniel Lauer and Anna Maria Phelps, and then two recently discovered victims, Terry Lynn Spa Howell and Laurie Ann Powell. About 10 days ago, Laurie Ann Powell was revealed to be linked to serial killer Alan Wade Wilmer via DNA. And our case has suddenly expanded much further than we had originally thought. And so when that case break happened, I wrote to Fitz, our favorite profiling collaborator, to ask if he and Ray would be willing to answer some profiling questions for us on Alan Wade Wilmer Sr., our suspect. And Fitz very kindly said, yes, he would. Bill, did I leave anything out, or was that a good enough summary?
Yeah, no, it's a great summary. One thing I would add, you've mentioned 10 victims, 4 of whom now have been linked via DNA to our deceased suspect, Alan Wade Wilmer. He's a waterman from Lancaster County, Virginia. So we're confirmed now with 4 victims, and then the other 6, we're still trying to see if we can connect Wilmer or other suspects to their murders. So we've got 6 kind of open cases, and 4, law enforcement seems to be avoiding the use of the term closed, but at least linked to Wilmer is probably a fair way to put that. Maybe our 2 longtime FBI agents can clue us into what the right lingo is.
Well, I think, Kristen, you emailed me some interesting questions and valid questions, and I think by walking through them, we can, answer a lot of things that there may be some listeners out there that's brand new to this, and obviously your veteran listeners will know a lot more about this case. And we've had you on Cold Red, both of you, and we've been on, of course, Mind Over Murder. So I guess just ask away the questions. Ray, anything before we kick in about the case?
No. I've also had a chance to look at those same questions. So whenever you're ready, Kristen.
Okay, so our first question, just in the 4 victims that Wilmer has been linked to, we have 3 different types of weapons: a gun, strangulation, and stabbing. In your experience, do serial killers typically stick with one method of killing, like Son of Sam and the 22, or are they more likely to vary, like Wilmer seems to?
I'll start with that. There are times when serial killers will vary. That's part of their modus operandi. That can change. What usually doesn't change is their signature behavior, and that is their particular choice of victims, which can alter slightly depending on what and who they come upon in terms of opportunity and convenience. But someone like Wilmer, who may have been traveling, he may have been in hunting mode. And I think I said when we were with you before, he was an apex predator. This guy was looking and searching his waterway areas for his victims all the time. He may have had his gun with him on some occasions. Other times he didn't, and he came upon someone that said, oh, I have my knife in the back, I can use that. Or sometimes if he sizes them up, sees maybe two women that couldn't put up quite the fight that maybe some men did. He just used, his hands or other less lethal type opportune weapons. So it is not unusual for serial killers to, in fact, uh, utilize different weapons, certainly from my experience. Ray?
No, I kind of agree with Jim. There's really no single rule here. Some serial offenders are extremely consistent with their MO, for example, choice of weapon or how they approach the individuals. But most methods serve a practical purpose as part of their fantasy. And a lot of times they vary because of situational situations or developmental reasons. For instance, it could be victim resistance, it could be opportunity, it could be their access to weapons, or even experimentation. When you look at a lot of serial killers, okay, there's a variation in their MO is not rare. So in actuality, when you look at Wilmer's use of a gunshot, strangulation, and stabbing, and it's linked to these victims, it's not atypical if you expect something identical when you're looking at the signature every time. But it's really within the range of behavior that serial offenders actually act, especially when you look at different victim contexts. In this situation, couples versus lone victims, location, and whether sexual assault even occurred.
One thing that's worth noting with Wilmer as well is that we know a fair amount about his background. He died in 2017. He's a waterman. He's expert on the water, and this area of Virginia is just surrounded by these beautiful rivers and inlets, and of course the Chesapeake Bay. He's also a crack shot, and he's actually a championship archer. So he has great skills, even winning archery competitions. He's a hunter. He is known to go out and live in the woods for days or even weeks at a time when he has time off, killing and eating his own food. So he really knows his way around the woods, the water, and the use of weapons.
And quite frankly, human beings were the ultimate prey for him.
Mm-hmm.
And whether he had the exact weapons he wanted, and let's face it, if it was a crowded environment, I mean, I won't say, I know he didn't do these things in the inner city or in crowded areas, but maybe there was a car within 20 or 200 feet or a half mile, and he just said, "Hey, I like these victims here for my own purposes, but a gun would attract attention to me. So tonight I'm not going to use the gun."
Mm-hmm.
So it could be a very utilitarian, and as Ray said, sort of environmentally oriented in terms of what's in his environment at the time. He also may have a police interaction. I know we're going to come to that a little bit later, where that if they find him with a gun, there could be all kinds of problems for him. So he sort of morphs after that interaction with law enforcement and decides not to carry the gun anymore. He just has rope or wire or certainly a knife, a sharp instrument of some point, and that is once again this apex predator. He knows how to alter his hunting style to get across. And just if I didn't explain it early on, modus operandi, it's method of operations, the Latin term. That is how a crime is carried out successfully. Signature behavior is usually need-driven behavior, usually sexually oriented, and these are the fetishes, the paraphilias that someone has within them. It's okay to have a fetish or paraphilia if you're on your own, do your own thing, or with a consensual adult. But when you do it forcefully with someone else, that's of course where the law is broken and bad things happen, and that's the difference. So if someone like Wilmer has these sort of fetishes, paraphilias, that's part of his signature behavior. And the strangulation, and I hate to get graphic like this, with Bill right on us, but actually watching someone's life fade away from them, as bizarre as it sounds, that's part of his sexual satisfaction and what thrills him, and that's and that's part of the signature behavior. That doesn't change as much. MO can for various reasons, and we see it all the time in serial offenders.
I'll just add this one last piece. There's not a real big jump here from how he hunted animals to how he hunted humans.
Yes, exactly.
There's really not a big jump here.
I just returned from Virginia, and I was with Kristen, and we met with several new people who have potentially some very interesting leads. But one of the things that we talked about, Kristen and I, was that this almost begins to feel like hunting behavior.
Mhm.
Like we would think of, like you're saying, Ray, hunting animals, but this might be people as prey. I know it's very disturbing for me, and probably for Kristen too, but it is something that it sort of bubbled up in conversation over the weekend meeting with these folks.
Yeah, I'm sure.
One of the things that's been interesting is watching sort of the evolution of this case as more victims have come to light. So like Fitz and Ray, when I first met you, we only had the 8 victims that were part of the Colonial Parkway murders. But in the last 2 years, Terry Lynn Howell has been another confirmed victim, and now Laurie Ann Powell as well. And so with the 2 of them, we now have confirmation that Wilmer was sexually assaulting multiple victims. When it was just the 8, it seemed like Robin Edwards was just the one-off because she was the only one of the victims that we could tell had been sexually assaulted. But now it becomes apparent that Wilmer assaulted all of the women that he has been tied to. So my question for you guys is, does this mean that when he was out hunting couples, his focus was likely on the women as opposed to being on the men?
Jim, you want me to go here?
Yeah, you go first this time. Go ahead.
When you look at if he sexually assaulted a woman, what does that mean? Was he hunting women rather than men? Sexual assault of female victims strongly indicates, at least in my mind, that sexual motivation and control of a woman was a key element in at least some of these murders. When couples are targeted, the offender's primary victim can be the women, whether that's a sexual fantasy or a control aspect of it. But while the male partner is killed to either eliminate a witness or eliminate an obstacle. This pattern fits many cases that we've seen in the past, Jim and I, where couples will target it for sexual assault, and assault is only present on one of the partners. The presence of sexual assault on multiple women regarding Wilmer has been leaked and supports that women were his focal point of his predatory behavior, even when he attacked couples. The men just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Yeah, and I would just add that this is not all that unusual if a sexual predator is on the prowl and he's good at what he does. And I hate putting it in those terms, but he's experienced. He gets better each time he undertakes one of these attacks. A couple, even with a man in there who, of course, could put up more of a fight, just adds to the challenge, just adds to the excitation. And look, this Wilmer isn't alone in this area. You mentioned Son of Sam earlier. He went after couples. Israel Keys was known to go after couples. I lived in Florence, Italy for about 4 months, and I was very aware of the monster of Florence
Right.
through the late 60s, through
Yeah.
the 80s, who killed all couples, I think, straight, gay, I mean, all combinations there. So, and that's just, 3 of them. Other, Richard Speck went after groups of people, others did in the Gainesville killer. I forget his name at the top of my head, but in Gainesville, Florida, the university. So, so this is not unusual, and it just adds to the overall thrill of the hunt. Quite frankly, the sexual release at the end could almost be like secondary or tertiary in importance to some of these guys. It's about the control that takes place first, and the manifestation of the power that he has over not just one but 2 people, and that's just all part of the signature behavior of this guy, which I described earlier. And he gets good at it. He knows how to control the males. You take them out first or threaten them first. If you tie them up, that's what I always tell people. I've told them from my earliest days in the FBI. If you're in a room somewhere in your car and someone comes up to you with a gun, a weapon, and he starts to bind your arms and legs, fight. You're probably going to be dead afterwards. Don't let them tie you up, and it's worth at least getting a punch to this guy's head or kicking him or something. And I don't know exactly in all the Colonial Parkway murder cases, but if there's ligatures involved in terms of tying someone up, I know Israel Keys did that and others. That's when you just say, dude, if I'm going to die, I'm going to die punching you out or trying to get your gun off you, something like that.
Mm-hmm. There are ligatures used in some of the Colonial Parkway murders, and I know in Kathy and Becky's incident, which is the first and the only lesbian couple, Kathy really struggled with this man, and ended up with hair in her hand, which was shown to be in evidence at autopsy. I still have never gotten a straight answer as to what has happened with the testing of the hair. But there was a struggle in that example, and it does appear that ligatures were used several times in the Colonial Parkway murders. Do you think the gun which shows up with one of the couples, Robin Edwards and David Knobling, were shot? Do you think the gun may be used in the early stages to establish control, and then it's put aside, or do you think he's varying his techniques?
I think, in my estimation, it's very possible he's absolutely varying his techniques, but his initial crime was a lot that he didn't have the confidence to be able to do or what he needed to do. And the gun gave him that confidence. And as he gained confidence, he kind of pulled away from those things. But when you look at the ligatures, I think most of the ligatures, and I don't know, but I would bet that most of the ligatures were used as a control method, especially if you're dealing with two people, rather than as part of the act of what he was doing. But I think as he gained in, and Jim talked about this, the more of these offenses he committed as he went, he became better educated, he became smarter, he became stronger in his ability to do things, became wiser. And a lot of times he didn't need things because he knew exactly what they do. He knew exactly how people were going to react to him. And he that's how he was able to be successful throughout that period of time that he actually committed these crimes.
I always offer investigators too about serial cases. It could be serial bank robber or serial bomber, killer in this case, rapist. The first crime, and that's the tricky part, we don't always know what is the first crime. The first reported crime is the only one that we can go on. That is where most of the evidence and most of the behavior will be closest linked to the offender. Geographically, behaviorally, forensically, that's where the person is. If it is in fact the first offense, that'll tell us most about that individual, the area of familiarity, their comfort zone, not to mention how they go about approaching victims. Are they, smooth talkers like a Bundy? Are they blitzers like it sounds like Wilmer was? And that tells us a lot. And I even helped solve a few serial bank robbery cases by saying, let's go back. All right, you have 10 robberies. Okay, let's go back to the first one. That's where most of your evidence is going to be. It may or not be fingerprints or DNA, but there'll be some other behavioral characteristics. And in many cases, it's the evidence at that scene, a car stop afterwards, traffic ticket or parking ticket that was issued that can help solve that particular case. So yeah, the first offense of any crime, and Ray kind of summarized it nicely, was that's when they're kind of experimenting, trying, and they need to build from there. And whatever works, they only improve upon that.
I tell you guys, and I got to tell you something. What Jim said is so freaking true. And I'll tell you that I remember being on the job in the bureau, working a bank robbery case, and this guy had hit 15 times.
Wow.
We go back. I said, let's go back to the very first robbery. We go back to the very first robbery. He lived 2 blocks from the very first bank robbery. And then as he became confident, he moved away from that initial comfort area that he was in. But most of these guys, when they commit the very first act, they want to make sure that they have an egress and they want to be able to get away with it. Otherwise, why do it? So they're going to make sure they're very comfortable in where they're doing it at. So Jim is so right in that, to be able to look at the very first area that you want to look at there. Great
Which
point.
actually brings us to my next question. I'm so glad you transitioned to it for me, Ray. Thank you. So, with the confirmation of Lorianne Powell as another victim connected to Wilmer via DNA, this extends Wilmer's hunting grounds out. We know he was hunting on the Colonial Parkway. We know he was hunting at Ragged Island, and now we know he was hunting across the river in Gloucester. So, would we learn anything more about Wilmer by doing geographic profiling now that we have several areas where we know he hunted and dumped bodies?
The quick answer is yes. I know the Canadian law enforcement officer who actually invented geographic profiling, and he's taught it over the years. And it's it's an arrow in the quiver of investigators. And if you do have 3 or more events that you can pinpoint to certain geographic areas on a map with GPS and getting, longitudinal and latitudinal coordinates and all, it's much easier. They really can come up with a very solid central zone that is considered the comfort zone of the offender. It may not be where they're living at the exact time of the offenses, but it certainly could tie into where they work, where they used to live, or have a strong, familial connection to that area. Yeah, so geographic profiling has certainly worked in the past for people I know, and the simple version of it, you can take an old-fashioned compass that you used to have in grade school with a pencil on one end.
Oh, yeah.
And you just do like a circle, maybe like 3 inches, and every incident you do a circle around it. It's more scientific with the folks who do this full time, but you really just put all those circles together, and then you shade in the spot is a conjunction for all of them.
Right.
And that's a place where you want to spend some time looking at suspects. And it doesn't mean you can go door to door, but you come up with 10 suspects. One of them lives or used to live in that shaded area. That's who you prioritize at that point in time. So I don't know how it would work out for Wilmer. I don't have all that information here, but and we feel, at this time, it'll be a good experiment, if you will, or research for someone who does that kind of work to, in fact, test it out with Wilmer and see if that central area, wherever it is some area that he would be his base of operations, either present or past.
One interesting development with Wilmer now, he's a waterman, and he has a boat which he uses for crabbing, oystering, fishing, etc. But it's the type of boat that actually has a very shallow draft. In other words, it doesn't extend that far down into the water. So from what we're hearing from other watermen is that boat could actually get as close in as water that was only 1.5 feet or 2 feet deep. So he could get quite close to the shore. We think sometimes he's using his very distinctive truck, which was one of the things that the FBI was looking for at the time of the first incidents. But now we realize that he's using, we think, both the truck and the boat. And as I mentioned, this area, which Kristen knows very well because she grew up there, there's just a tremendous amount of water there with all these rivers, creeks, and inlets. So do you think the profiling thing would still work, keeping in mind we might actually end up with a central circle that could be in the middle of the water?
Yes, I do. And, with a lot of the same things that Jim talked about, you have to remember when you have multiple confirmed crime locations, like an attack site, dump site, sightings of his vehicle, maybe where he went hunting. When you have that's giving you a pattern of movements, and that can point investigators to look for locations that have often been overlooked, like where he fished, storage sheds, routes between sites maybe. But knowing that he had ties to the waterways and the marina and even his vehicle, I think that helps refine about his comfort zone and his mobility. And that's going to, the worst thing it's going to do is it's going to generate investigative leads. It's going to make you come up with witnesses, owners of specific slips, fuel purchases, all these different things. And this is a standard technique that investigators would love to be able to have that information when they use that spatial data point information, because that, I'll tell you, I've seen it work in real life. I've seen it work when you have an abduction of a child, and we use the same type of thing when we look at offenders. It's a little bit different, but it's the same kind of context, and it really does bring it home, and it closes it very quickly for investigators. It really does.
We're just curious, are there other serial offenders that you're aware of who've used boats to dump bodies? Or is this unique to Wilmer?
No,
The
it's not.
mob, I mean, the mob would put people in the water. Who's the guy that killed his pregnant wife in California?
Scott Peterson?
Yeah, he used
Scott
a boat,
Peterson.
dumped her there, and
Joe Rifkin. Joe
okay.
Rifkin did it. And he murdered 17 women, disposed of several of them in the Long Island waterways.
Okay.
Hudson River and the East River, Jim.
Okay.
Gary Ridgway, the Green River killer.
Mm-hmm.
You look at him.
Did he have a boat, or just put him in the water?
He had a boat. He used a
Okay.
boat, from what I understand. And he
Um,
dumped victims in rivers and even water-filled ravines.
You know, if you're if you drive a cement truck for a living and you're a serial killer, you're going to put your bodies in a fresh hole where the cement goes on top.
Right.
If you're a grave digger, and we've known cases you sneak a body in, you know, before the casket goes in the next day, and that's one way, if you're a serial killer, of getting rid of that body. If you own a wood chipping business, I'm not going to get graphic.
Right.
Mm.
Eesh.
Kristen's holding her mouth like she's ready to.
I'm following close behind
You've
her.
seen
I
Fargo.
gotcha.
You've seen Fargo. The
Yeah.
movie Fargo, and
Yeah.
Yep.
yeah. So the bottom line is, what is convenient for you in terms of any sort of method of disposing of a body, you
Okay.
will utilize. And this guy had a boat, and he took it, and that was an easy way for him to do that. And you know, it always helps in committing a crime. It's one thing killing someone, leaving the body there. Everyone then knows it's a murder. If you can somehow dispose of a body and dispose of it well,
Right.
then could it just be a missing person? And of course, that's always a possibility. And then you have no forensic evidence at the scene, you know, of the body. So that's always the ideal way to do it. And I think everyone has that on their mind. And there's been studies: is it a shallow grave? Is it a deep grave? And the shallower the grave, or the farther away it is from where the person was abducted or where they live, could be a clue whether the offender knew the victim. And there's all kinds of research going on there. But before we go away from this, I just want to give a shout out to Kim Rossmo. He's one of our fellow profilers in the international the profiling group to which we belong, and he's the one that came up with geographic profiling many years ago. And there's now software you can purchase which utilizes his formula. And I'm not sure it's authorized in the courts or not, just like profiling isn't, like a polygraph isn't, but it's a great investigative tool to narrow that suspect pool to try to identify when names do come up. Hey, this guy matches the profile, the
Right.
geographic profile, and he flunked a polygraph. Let's focus on him. And you can't use that evidence in court, but then you do the evidence after that fact, and you can get it from there.
Right. In the small world department, we've worked with another Canadian, Doug McGregor, who studied with Kim Rossmo and went to school, and trained with him. And he has talked quite a bit about Kim Rossmo and all the things he's learned from him. And even as we were talking a few minutes ago, I thought to myself, with all this new information that Kristen and I are developing, I think another conference call with our friend Doug is probably called for. I know he listens to Mind Over Murder, so he may hear us talking about him, but in a nice way.
Of course.
You know, I just want to add one thing to what Jim said before you go on, Kristen. That Wilmer's use of his commercial fishing boat and access to multiple marinas, kind of ties into the disposal areas that he had in these waterways. I mean, look, he's using it for a number of different reasons. Many offenders have. Water is used to destroy trace evidence. A lot of times, the moving currents have
Mhm.
a tendency to disperse or even relocate remains.
Right.
Yeah.
And Bill, when you said that he was able to get into spots that had 1 or 2 feet of water,
Yes.
it leads me to say, well, he has access to isolated areas
Mhm.
that are inaccessible by anybody else, which make perfect dump sites.
Right.
You know,
And and
he's
in,
familiar. He's familiar with this, and he's familiar with those areas, which reduces his risk.
And interestingly, Alan Wade Wilmer Sr. is one of three brothers. His older brother, William Keith Wilmer, who goes by Keith, his middle name, he died at the end of April. The older brother and Alan, the middle brother, are also suspected in another homicide of a woman from Lancaster County, Virginia, where they grew up. A body was found. The victim's name was Mary Keyser Harding, and she was found in the Rappahannock River. And the two Wilmer brothers are longtime suspects in that murder. And they believe that she was raped and her body was placed in the water and weighted down with
Mhm.
chains and weights of a type that a fisherman or oysterman, waterman would use. Now, that case remains unsolved to this day, but the Wilmers' names have been mentioned repeatedly as potential suspects in that case as well.
Hmm.
Hmm.
What a family.
Yeah. Right.
Please tell me
So
they didn't spawn.
no,
No,
they do have
All
kids, and
right.
actually their family has been nothing but
All
helpful
right. Well,
to
okay.
investigators and to us.
well, they say All
Um,
in the Family. That was the name of that show, right?
Yeah, to be fair to the kids, they were quite young when all of this horrible stuff was going on. Um, Alan Wade Wilmer Sr. had a daughter and a son, and I think they were 8 and 10 at the time of the Colonial Parkway murders. And as
yeah.
Kristen says, they are shocked by this, and they the families told me directly that they almost feel like there were two Alan Wilmers. There
Yep.
was the man that they knew, mostly up in Lancaster, Virginia, where he's from, and then, as they put it, down in Hampton, which is the area where the Colonial Parkway murders took place. It's almost like following a divorce from his wife, he moved down to the peninsula area of Virginia and had much less contact with his family. But they've said it almost feels like there's two Allens. The
Dr.
man that,
Jekyll, Mr. Hyde.
yeah, very much so.
Yeah.
Well, I'll take back that spawning comment. The sins of the father certainly doesn't apply in every case. The one or two brothers obviously had some problems,
Yeah.
but we'll assume the children, are of a different ilk.
I mean, they've been wonderful about helping and collaborating with law enforcement and with us, and they're horrified because they had no idea. So, we've been, I think, really fortunate that they have been so cooperative,
Hmm.
give DNA and everything else. But
I agree.
it's so hard to think that I think in a lot of ways they're victims too in this.
You're right. They are. They're
One
secondary victims. Absolutely.
One thing we're wondering about this movement back and forth where Wilmer is killing couples clearly, but he's also attacking individuals. Is there anything to that? Is that more opportunistic? Or, in other words, we think he's always looking for victims, and maybe he enjoys the challenge of attacking a couple, but then he'll shift over if there's an opportunity to attack a single woman. Does any of that make sense?
You have to ask with a guy like this, and I'm not sure how much you know about his drug or alcoholic intake.
Hmm.
Was he a drug abuser or alcoholic, and depending on his level of intoxication or being high, would that somehow lower his inhibitions even more
Mhm.
than they normally are? Would he take more chances and going after two people, or as opposed to one, and then maybe a man in there too? Is he a situational offender, a preferential offender, an opportunistic offender? And that's the three, basic kind of categories we see over the years. And non-preferential offenders in there too, where they just, it's an old lady one day, a young kid the next, someone in the middle other times. But so I think with Wilmer, from what I'm hearing, it seems like if the opportunity present itself and he had a little mental checklist, probably wasn't in writing or a tab of paper, but if, dark enough, quiet enough, remote enough, no other, witnesses around or potential witnesses, and the victim seemed to match up, his kind of victim, whatever that means, he was going to go for it. He'll take his chances. I'll tell you what, any offender and any person should know this. If you have the element of surprise as an offender on your side, that's a big, big advantage. Plus, bring some kind of weapon with you, or at least have, the hand and arm strength that you can choke someone if you have to. That does a lot. And that element of surprise really opens the door. And he may have known how to. I remember as a plainclothes police officer, we're going to make an arrest on someone sitting in their car, and you know how to look out your rear. When you're a driver, you look straight back in your outside mirror, and you can look in your interior mirror. And we knew certain angles to approach the car, so this guy couldn't see us walking up. I guarantee you, as Wilmer progressed, as he evolved, he knew. And I know it was dark, and they may be doing something else in the car at the time, but he still would know how to approach that car, most likely from behind at just the right angle. And whether he would open the door, smash it in, however he would get in, pretend he's someone else, he's lost. I don't know exactly what means, he would use to get into these cars and access these victims, but it could just depend. And he was, no one's saying he's a dumb guy. I don't know what his educational level was, but he certainly had hunting smarts and street smarts, if you will, even if applied into a more rural or a wooded or even aquatic area, and he just knew how to succeed. He was one of the best at what he did, and I hate paying anyone a compliment like this, but we have to say what it was, and he just got better as he went along too.
One of the reasons why Wilmer moved on to the FBI's radar in 1988 was when they were investigating the disappearance of one of these couples. In reaching out to couples that were parking along the Colonial Parkway, which is very beautiful but lonely, no lights, no businesses. It's designed to be this ribbon of beautiful parkland along these rivers. A number of couples said that a man matching Wilmer's description and driving Wilmer's extremely distinctive truck.
That's right.
Was kind of, when you said blitz attack a minute ago, it sounded like that. He would suddenly appear at the window, and he was very aggressive, and he would demand driver's licenses, and he would tell them, "You don't belong here. It's dangerous here. Let me see your driver's license." He wasn't dressed as a cop, but he behaved like a police officer or law enforcement officer would. And many of these couples said they complied. They gave him their driver's licenses. Interestingly, he did not ask for registrations. He only asked for driver's licenses. And they often gave their driver's licenses up to Wilmer. And then he would come back later. Now, obviously, these couples survived. Otherwise, we wouldn't have heard their stories. But this happened multiple times. Do you think he was kind of escalating, taking steps closer to the point where he would actually be willing to engage and hurt these people? Or why would there be so many reports of a similar man driving a similar vehicle, aggressively approaching couples, but then not harming them?
I think Wilmer, and you look at this type of offender, he had both a sexual and a control-based motive. I don't believe every single person he came in contact with, he killed. I think there's probably some people early on that were test dummies, and that he did some of those things where you were able to get this information. But you have to understand, when his gear is towards women, and he's principally seeking opportunities to access women, and that could be either women that are alone or women that are with a partner. You know, when you target couples, it can also be a pragmatic choice on the part of the offender, on Wilmer's part. Like, you'll go to places like lovers' lanes, which would be something very similar to what you just described. And some offenders, like Jim was talking about, are very selective. They have a preference that's driven, and others are opportunistic. But they all act when the situation matches their needs. And those needs can be the time, the location, the victim, and the vulnerability of that victim. The pattern that you kind of talked about, the couples and individuals with the sexual assaults concentrated on women, suggests a core sexual / control motivation, combined with opportunistic selections in this.
I'm taking notes frantically.
And I do
here.
remember, I have read, of course, enough about this case in our earlier conversations. Thanks for reminding me, though, of him being, the faux police officer here, or some kind of, ranger or whatever he was pretending to be. But yeah, he's sizing these people up. That's a whole control thing right there too.
Yeah.
Even if he's not, following through and, actually abducting these people, or holding them, in his possession and then killing them. So, but that was and who knows what he did afterwards in the privacy of his truck. If he's driving that truck up as close as he did, that I know is very distinctive in its coloring and words and numbers on the side, or the back, and he said, well, I'm not going to do anything bad to these people. Just going to go up and kind of play with them. I remember as a teenager, I don't think I put this in my first book, but I do remember going to a lover's lane in Philadelphia with a young lady, and nothing heavy duty, but I'll never forget, a guy just popped his head up, and he's looking right in the window at us.
Really?
Yeah.
God.
And it was spring or summer. The windows were down, and it was kind of a lover's lane. There were cars not too far away.
Jim, details. What was the girl's name?
I'm not going to go into that.
Does she listen? Does she listen to Code Red?
Is she on Facebook? Is she on Facebook?
Can she corroborate this story?
I'm more interested in the guy who stuck his head in my window, and I said,
I
"Get
agree.
the F out of here."
Well, okay, true.
But and if he remembers that part, so if he's listening. But I was a cop later on, and there were guys that would we would catch peeping toms going into and looking for young women. They wouldn't always be there to hurt them or kill them, but they got their jollies just looking in car windows. And that could be like an early sort of a gateway activity, but it sounds like Wilmer was already killing at that point, but just kind of regressing at some point, and then and trying to follow through, just this kind of the fun thing. So even if a police officer pulled him over or something, well, it wouldn't be that big of a deal. He's just kind of talking to people, making sure to tell them, to stay safe, whatever. But it's certainly high risk behavior on his part, and he certainly made sure that there wouldn't be too many other people around to see him even doing these things, which are, I'm not sure, illegal. If he identifies himself as a law enforcement officer, that's illegal. Whether he had a fake badge or some kind of ID, he was dressed like a regular guy. You said maybe like even a waterman, and that wouldn't have been very much, impressive upon a person seeing him. So he just had an authority about him. Like I said, he was really good at what he did, and he knew how to, bring in his personality and his demeanor to act the role, and it worked for him virtually every time, as far as we know.
Right.
Jim, I have to ask before you go, Bill. I have to ask. In book 1 of your 4-book episode, you talked about a guy in the park. Is there any connection between the guy in the park with you and this guy that came up to the window?
I think you mean Hack Off Harry.
I don't know. I didn't know his name, Jim. I wasn't going to mention his name here. I thought
Well-
you didn't want to mention names. If you're going to mention his name, you got to give us the girlfriend's name.
I'm not going to give the girlfriend's name. I don't kiss and tell or park and tell. But no, Hackoff Harry used to walk through these woods. Grew up in Philly in the Olney neighborhood, Tookaney Creek Parks uh, uh, Park, and it was an urban area, but a couple acres of woods. And we heard this rumor about this guy that walked around naked. I was there with my two buddies, and we're like 11 and 12, and it was like the last day of school, afterwards. And here comes this naked guy. Hey, what are you guys doing? And we kind of look at each other, huh? And he didn't try anything with us. But years later, I just wondered, what was this guy up to? Where were his clothes? He wasn't carrying his clothes. He must have taken them off and hid them somewhere. He must have driven there. So anyway, would have been 8 years later, Ray, that I was in another park, more of a lover's lane. And if that was Hackoff Harry, I didn't recognize him. Hackoff, if you're out there, Hackoff, come on Cold Red. Ray wants to talk to you.
Yeah. I love the naked guy challenging the three kids. What are you doing here? And he's standing there nude.
Well, then at one point he said, I bet you I'm bigger than you guys. And he was like a 30 to 35-year-old guy, and he probably was back then. We didn't really care, and we weren't about to show him or test him. But finally, he just walked away. But I know I had a stick in my hand. If he was going to come at me, and my buddies, they had like a rock they picked up, but he stayed like 10 feet away, walked around naked, and then just took off. So that was a weirder element of my life. And Ray, thanks for bringing that up. It was in my book. And what the hell does it mean? And now I got involved in investigating these guys later on. And whoever knows if that was a gateway offense for how he was affectionately known, Hackoff Harry. But we never actually saw him hacking off, and I'm using air quotes.
That's where if you guys remember, there was an episode on Seinfeld when he was arrested as a serial killer, and the cop said something about the guy in the park. You have to see it. If the listeners are listening, there's an episode, and Jim, I think you know what episode. I'm a Seinfeld fan. If you listen to the episode, Seinfeld's being questioned by the detective about being a serial killer. He talks about the guy in the park having something in his pants for him, and Seinfeld doesn't say anything. And when he finally lets him go, Seinfeld said, "How'd you know about the guy in the park?" And they got that from reading Jim's book.
I'll take credit, and I'll contact my friend Jerry and try to get some residuals out of that.
Yeah, I think Larry David owes you some money by now.
There you go.
Mm-hmm.
So do we have time for one more question?
Sure.
Okay. So we know that Wilmer killed and dumped bodies in or near water until 1988, but he was questioned by the FBI in the disappearance of Keith Cole and Cassandra Haley in April of that year. And after that, his next set of victims were killed and dumped away from the water. Might he have changed his dump sites in response to being looked at by the FBI?
Can we change that term to disposal site?
Sure. Might he have changed his disposal sites in response to being looked at by the FBI?
Yes, and we're not going to edit it out, but years ago we tried to get away from the word dump because as it's like trash or something you're talking about. So you had no bad intentions there, and Bill, you certainly didn't. But I understand the gist of your question, and certainly he altered his MO. No surprise there at all for a guy who still had this need-driven behavior, and that's what we're remembering here. Most of us, the four of us on this crossover podcast, and certainly the audience, we all have need-driven behaviors. We have to breathe and eat, and of course, there's other bodily functions we take care of. But none of us necessarily are controlled by these, in some cases, sexually sadistic activities that obviously someone like Wilmer had. So the FBI talked to him. He obviously didn't feel all that concerned, all that scared. He didn't think they had enough on him. And he said, all right, well, they think I'm this guy. They think the body's here. Well, I'm going to alter my MO. His signature didn't change all that much, I'm sure. He still had that behavioral activity with these women and what he did with them and to them. But it wasn't all that hard for him to say, you know what? I'm smarter than these FBI guys. I'm just going to move from Zone A to over here to, Zone B or C or D, whatever he calls it. And I'm still going to do my thing. And they're not going to put two and two together. So that doesn't surprise me at all. A guy who has this many kills and rapes under his belt, he couldn't just stop with a warning. Ted Kaczynski, his composite was sketch went out after his I think 10th bombing, and he went dark for 7 years. I mean, we didn't know his name back then. It was the Unabomber, and then all of a sudden he comes back with a vengeance in
Right.
'93. So his signature behavior didn't change. He still wanted to send these bombs to these representative targets, but his MO altered, where he took 7 years off. And the bombs, actually, with that 7 years of rest, they were even stronger and more lethal after the fact. So BTK took time off. It looks like he was going to come back and maybe do some more killings, but he made a mistake with the computer disk, whatever, that the police could read some information on it. So yeah, these guys take time off, and but they can or they can alter their behavior to, in fact, successfully commit their crimes.
Jim's right, and a case even closer to both Jim and I than any other ones he talked about was about a bank robber, Carl Gugasian. And I wrote a book on it. Jim and I worked the case together. And Gugasian, we believe, was involved in shooting a police officer in 1982.
Wow.
And bank robbery stopped for 6 years. And then they began back up in 88. And when we asked Gugasian why he did it, he says, I just needed a break. I got tired. But it just so happened they stopped right when the police officer was killed. The police officer was shot. He wasn't killed.
Mm-hmm. Oh, so the officer survived.
He survived for about 38 years and he died. And then they claimed his death to be a homicide 38 years later as a result of the bullet that was lodged in their carotid artery.
Wow.
It was up in Columbia, Pennsylvania. And, they believed that he was tied into it, but they were never able to tie him in with any forensic evidence. And he's denied it the whole time. But Jim and I both feel pretty confident about that. But, it's well documented. Like what we were telling you about, these type of offenders that switch tactics, they move their sights further from their prior sites. They change vehicles. They change disposal methods. They take greater precautions. And Bill, help me with this. Was Wilmer surveilled and searched in 1988?
Yes, he was extensively. They searched his home, his truck. They found a lot of evidence that they thought they were going to be able to tie him into the murders, but for whatever reason, after receiving 2 polygraphs, he passed one and one was inconclusive. But I even tracked down the retired polygraph examiner. He told me flat out, we should have never let that guy go. So they were really, really close. And the 2 agents whom my father knew that were working the case, they were convinced they had the right guy. Ultimately, he slipped through their hands.
Well, it's not unusual for someone that has been searched, interviewed, as you just said, to change the sequence along what they're doing. But I think it's important for us also to be cautious when we talk about the sequence, because there could be other factors too, and I don't want to exclude those factors.
Right.
Sometimes opportunity, sometimes the fantasy of the offender could be evolving, and sometimes it's just logistics. But a lot of times when you are contacted by law enforcement, it's a plausible trigger for a tactical shift in what you're doing. Absolutely.
Right.
And psychologically, how these people think, what better way to prove you're not the killer than after being confronted by police, FBI, law enforcement, to go out and commit yet another crime?
Right.
Because you were going to be thinking, they get FBI, hey, you guys just talked to me, last week, last month, a year ago.
Right.
I would, why would you think I would go out and do that? That was almost like a plausible deniability they could add in there. And even the FBI themselves, I can almost see, boy, another murder, Ray, but we talked to that guy just, 6 months ago. Do you really think, and I don't know if he would do that or not. You'd still have to keep them in the suspect pool naturally, but apparently, at least he wasn't in this particular case, and some missed opportunities here, including Bill, what you said about the polygraph examiner and how they could have pushed that a little bit more with this guy. But again, we said this the last, a year or two ago when we were on with you about Wilmer. Whatever you want to say about his education and his cultural upbringing, all that stuff, maybe lacking, but boy, he had a sense of survival. He had a sense of street smarts, wood smarts, if you want to call them, or waterline, waterfront smarts, and he just knew how to succeed. And you hate
Jim,
giving compliments.
I think he knew how to succeed in that environment.
Well, yeah, of course.
In that environment where he was. I don't know how he would have fared outside of that environment, but in that environment, he was second to none. I agree with you.
He was. And you put him in the middle of a, Brooklyn or south side of Chicago, he wouldn't do very well. I'm just saying as a serial killer. But in this particular, this was his hunting ground, and he knew left from right and up from down, and he knew his victims, and in terms of who were the likely ones that he could with whom he could succeed in killing and assaulting otherwise, and that's his legacy. And he was a tough guy to catch during his lifetime, and thank goodness for the advent of DNA analysis over the last 20, 25 years, that we could start really closing these cases and giving some sort of closure to family members such as Bill. And I know he was on the radar even before that, but now we have some conclusive information here. So, but yeah, this guy knew what he was doing and how to do it.
Bill, I have one question for you and Kristen. I know you said that Wilmer's been dead for the last 8 years, 2017. What about his brothers? Are either of them alive?
They're both dead.
Okay.
One brother, the older brother, Keith, that we mentioned earlier, he died at the end of April 2025. Oddly, they had a younger brother, Timothy, who died, and we've had a real hard time pinning this down. He died under kind of mysterious circumstances. It may have been a suicide almost a year to the day after the middle brother, Alan, our suspect, died. Alan Wade Wilmer Sr. died of natural causes, and at his home up in Lancaster County. He was kind of estranged from his family. His body wasn't found for about a month. Interestingly, his younger brother died, we think, of a suicide almost exactly a year to the day. So all three brothers, Keith the oldest, Alan, and then Tim, are all gone now.
Okay. All right. Okay.
And they took a lot of information
with them
to the grave with them, no doubt.
Yeah, without question.
They did.
You want to steer to a close?
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
Thank you
I'm
both
sorry,
so
Kristen.
much.
Go ahead.
You're welcome.
Thank you both so much for helping us out with this. We love being able to put these questions to people that we know will help us get answers, especially because our current case agents are being a little less than forthcoming with information. So we're glad to have two former FBI guys who are willing to talk to us and help us kind of sort these things out for ourselves. We really appreciate the both of you.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Well, you're welcome, and I will say thank you for appearing on this live episode of Cold Red, and it'll be recorded versions will be out there too. So I'll sign us out and just say, everyone, thanks for listening. Like and subscribe to both podcasts, Mind Over Murder and Cold Red, and send us comments if you'd like. And thanks to our producers, Matt McLaughlin, Matt Robinson, our music producer, Rick Schilling, who I'll be having Thanksgiving dinner with tomorrow. And tune in next time for Mind Over Murder, but also Cold Red. Take care, everyone. See you next time.